So it's been a busy few weeks, that's for sure. Full-time job and then work over on IGN, and trying to fit everything in has been difficult, so apologies everyone, I've been away for a while, but hopefully things will calm down. Well, they won't really, there's more busy stuff, but I've got a little bit of a schedule lined up over the next few weeks. I wanted to split this video out and get something up as early as possible, so yes, I have had access the last 2 weeks or so for The Last of Us Part 1 Remake, Remaster, whatever you want to call it in terms of that on the PS5. I wanted to split this up into a performance video so that it doesn't kind of confuse the whole detailed deep dive into the technology, the graphics, and all things around the title itself compared to the originals and what they've done and what they haven't done. So that's coming very soon over the weekend. Stay tuned for that. There's a lot of good stuff in there. But here, let's get into the performance. The PS5 version here does have a few modes, and I have covered this over on IGN, so you can go and check out that quick summary. It's very short in terms of hitting the main beats, but here on performance I can go a little deeper into certain parts of the game, and certainly on the loading aspect, which is one area that's a bit puzzling at this point. I think there's some areas for Naughty Dog to tweak there, but fundamentally what you've got is you've got two modes. You've got a performance mode, which has a dynamic 4K in the menu, and then you've got a fixed fidelity mode, which is 4K. And then on top of that, if you have a 120Hz screen, just like I've covered in detail with Ratchet & Clank, Insomniac's titles in terms of Spider-Man, you can then have a 120 FPS mode that allows that fidelity mode to no longer target 30 FPS, but 40 FPS, which is the split difference, the halfway between 30 and 60. And again, I've covered this in depth already, so go and check out the Ratchet & Clank video where I discussed it in more. This is the same functionality here. You don't get that if you don't have a 120Hz screen. You're fixed with 30 FPS. The performance mode targets 60 no matter what, and it's pretty much locked. Couldn't find any dips in all my tested sections here, and I played through the entire game, so I don't know where you're going to find some dips. There might be a few here and there, who knows. Obviously there's a lot of things in here dynamic, so you might get a few dips, but nothing of any concern. It's fully locked, and it's the one to choose if you don't want to have any issues of performance. And then on top of that, you've got the VRR mode, so you can turn that on, and that means that you can have a fully unlocked option. So it means the 40 FPS can run up to 50, and the 60 FPS can run up to 111 is the highest I saw. That's, you know, you're not going to see that very often, but we'll get into the different performance sections and how they play out. So the performance mode, it's locked. It's got no issues at all. It's fully 60. I couldn't find any issues whatsoever aside the cutscenes. So when obviously it jumps between shots, they hold a frame or sometimes two, which things like, you know, physics settling, characters warping to different positions, all that, it kind of hides all that out of the way, and maybe even the TAA elements. There's all that stuff that goes on in many engines. So this happens in every mode, doesn't matter whether it's 30 FPS fidelity, and in fact that can be slightly worse because obviously everything's of a lot higher resolution and quality in terms of the resolution buffers, the alpha effects, all that kind of stuff. So there's more data being shifted in that amount of time because bandwidth requirements are higher. So fundamentally, if you want to have no issues, then stick it on performance mode and you'll pretty much enjoy a locked 60 FPS. The 30 FPS mode is no issues at all. It doesn't drop below that, but the Fidelity 40 mode can dip below. So in heavy combat, in alpha effects, in heavy swamped areas, it can dip into the high 30s, the low 30s. It may even dip below it. It can catch any points, but it gets very close. So it's never bad, and it's pretty much a locked 30 throughout if you capped it at that, but the 40 FPS fidelity mode can certainly have a few hiccups below that 40 FPS mode. By unlocking it, we can get an idea of how that runs, and that means that you get this kind of performance, which is very inconsistent. Now, this is only possible because I've got the HD60X and Elgato, which allows me to capture and then run that through my analysis tool to give you VRR modes. You won't get this on this screen. You're watching it on a 60 FPS container, which means it will judder more than it does on a 40 FPS screen, or at least 120 FPS screen. And that's because your screen itself, you're watching this on most likely, is 60 Hz container, which means it can't VSync at 25 milliseconds, the requirement. Which means every 25 milliseconds you get a new frame. If you unlock it, it means it can skip somewhere up to the 16.6 milliseconds and between the 33, so it jumps back and forth. It's generally still a 40 FPS mode. It's great that the option's there, but it won't make a huge amount of difference, and you'll definitely feel the dips when it drops down below it because VRR can't pick it up. Now, if you do have, or when it comes out to public access, the 1440p mode, this is great here because if you turn that on the menu, you can still get 120 FPS at 1440p, whereas many TVs couldn't support that. They're in HDMI 2.1, which means you'd get 1080 120 on a lot of titles. So now at least you can get that 1440p output. One thing to note here here is the menu says dynamic on there, and obviously there's a few points when I was testing it on the IGN, but counting lots of pixels, all I'm counting here is 1440p, which is the base level that I assumed it ran at anyway based on the pixel counts I found on the IGN analysis. But I couldn't find any points where it goes to 4K, so either that's an error in the menu and actually it's not dynamic, or the DRS solution in the engine isn't working, and that might be the reason behind it, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But certainly most of the time it's 1440p in my counted sections here, testing more areas of the title itself, which means it is slightly softer, but it's not a huge delta if you're not sitting feet within the screen, and the extra fluidity that it offers is great. For me, the 40 FPS fidelity mode is quite good though. Generally throughout play, because the game's not action-packed from beginning to end, you get a lot of smooth movement, and it kind of closes that gap up to 60, but you certainly get sharper image quality, specifically in the cutscenes, because that really swamps out the GPU, and therefore it's demanding on the GPU when it's running them. And they look a lot better, but I'll cover that more in the other video. So aside that, the performance mode can actually run far, far higher. It can get, like I say, up to somewhere between the 70s and 80s generally in combat. It's inconsistent, but with VRR on, which is a necessity, you can't have it without it, even though I'm showing you it here, it means that it's the most consistent version to play in terms of faster input response and faster frame times. Probably consistent is not the right word. It's not the most consistent, that's performance, but it's certainly the fastest and most responsive. This means that the game, which is always a problem with Naughty Dog titles anyway, generally their input times are quite high. So this title certainly benefits quite significantly from that. But overall, the modes collate into an option of two modes that, with the unlocked option, can become 4 modes. Essentially, fidelity locked, fidelity unlocked, performance locked, performance unlocked, and then that final 5th one, which is you stuck at a 60 Hz screen, therefore you get 30 or 60 performance fidelity. That's it. Fundamentally, the performance is brilliant. It's rock solid throughout if you're playing the performance mode or 30 FPS mode. The 40 fidelity mode can dip, so it fluctuates between 30 and 40 something, 45-ish most of the time. It's nice that it's there. Personally, I would choose the 120/40 fixed mode. It's the most consistent of the two modes, because the VRR options flipping up and down, it can feel inconsistent because it's generally somewhere between 48 and 39. That's kind of where the averages work out, which you can see from my direct capture here, giving you all the details you need directly from the footage itself. If you're looking for dips and trying to blow stuff up and run things in, then yeah, possibly you'll see it. But my main aim here is to show you long runs, not quick 2-second edits of bits of frame rates at the worst point, and that's kind of not the point of the title. You don't play in little chunks, you play long sections, and in general play it doesn't feel bad to play at all. So overall it's a great performing title. And in fact, if you look back at the original PS3 title, which you can see here, as brilliant as it was, and I do cover that more in the original, just how impressive the original title was, and nothing being done here by the new Naughty Dog team internally changes the exceptional work done by the original team, which shifted this on hardware such as the PS3, which blows my mind just how much they maxed it out. But certainly you can see by performance they did max it out. It certainly was a title that struggled to run anywhere close to that 30 FPS when action kicked in, somewhere into the low 20s and sometimes even below it in some of the heavier sections with lots of alpha, foliage, all those areas that can swamp the fill rate and pixel fill rate and bandwidth of the machine. And this is generally something that's still true now of the engine. The engine itself generally seems to be very fill rate limited due to the amount of effects and buffers going on that the engine has, and therefore it relies heavily on lowering the pixel count for resolutions. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing the resolution levels here, which is almost, well, it's practically identical to what we saw with The Last of Us Part 2 update for PS5 using that BC mode. So we're not seeing a significant leap here. And it brings to one elephant in the room, which is the fact that, everyone's contentious about this remake and all that, and that's kind of irrelevant. It's a title that gets made and you buy it or you don't buy it. There's no, requirement for any company to make anything you don't want to buy. That's just stupid talk that I hear all the time, and it's contentious for stupid people. I'm going to say it. It is. It's a game. It's like anything. It's like somebody making an album and you don't like the band. Well, don't buy it then. It doesn't really matter, does it? So what we've got here is a title that could run on the PS4 and the PS4 Pro. Let's be honest, there's no reason why this couldn't, because it is benefiting from all the work that the team did from The Last of Us Part 2, the updated engine that delivered, Uncharted, all those benefits of real-time cutscenes, which was the first time it came into effect, the improvements to physically based shading, the GI bounce, and all the other elements of animation, AI routines, and everything that got improved moving over to the PS4 really pushed the title on. And what we're seeing here is a team utilising most of the benefits that engine brought and shifting everything over to the new engine. So that means it could have released on the PS4. And I do suspect that this probably was or has been built with a PS4 in mind. It might have been made, before it was going to be a PS5 exclusive. I don't know. I'm surmising at this point. But it would be a shame, I think, and a set of missed sales. I wouldn't be surprised if the PS4 version comes out at a later date, alongside potentially a PC release as well. That's always a caveat there with Sony pushing forward on that. But again, that's just me speculating. I'm not saying that's fact. That's just something that I suspect would happen. And the reason I say this as well is around the loading. So the loading in the engine, it's got a very specific way of decompressing data, basically reserving a huge chunk of space on your hard drive with the section you're in, and therefore it uses that as a temporary cache to help the minimal memory slot of the PS3. And in the testing there, the load testing, we can see that the PS4 loading into a chapter section that you're already in. So this is the fastest loading you'll see on all of them. This is loading the section, coming out, and then loading a chapter. So that decompression element is not there. It's 6.4 seconds on the PS4, and it's 8 seconds on the PS5, which is the fastest loading you'll get. Obviously, it's a lot slower on the PS3, but then it's older hard drive, smaller bandwidth, yada, yada, CPU, all that kind of good stuff. So this really isn't utilising the extra compression technology, the I/O, and the separate decompression technology that the PS5 offers. And this is likely because they haven't yet ported their engine fully to the PS5. So that behind the scenes, and remember, a lot of teams, Naughty Dog will be the same, they're split up into silos. So when you have a company as big as this and lots of different departments, the art department, the marketing, the sales department, and then you've got the technology department, the engine department, all of those will be doing their own little things. And I'm sure the team are busy beavering away, making the engine work as best they can for the PlayStation 5. Anyway, that's probably enough waffling. This is the performance levels. It works really well across all modes. The Fidelity 40 mode is the one I'd pick if you really want the best IQ, but the performance unlocked mode does perform very well. But if you don't want any hassles, just put it on the 60 FPS mode, never look back, and enjoy the title exactly as I said on the IGN review. I'll be back very soon with much more on this beautiful title and digging more into the conversations around loading the engine and all that kind of good stuff, and certainly just where those benefits are between the old and the new. And remember, I am completely self-funded and independent, so if you like what I do here, you can subscribe, you can share, you can join my Patreon and see exclusive access certainly on this and other things, and in addition to that, my retro content as well. Check out other videos on my channel, but I'll be back very soon on the next one.